Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bankroll Burners, the podcast for poker players who can't stop getting it in bad. I'm Mike,
And I'm Josh.
and as always, we are here going through some poker hands we've played. We're going to discuss them with each other, get some live reactions, and talk through them and try and get a little better.
Yeah, and of course, we haven't told each other about these hands yet, so we really will be reacting for the first time, which is often quite entertaining when I get to describe my puns to Mike and see his face as he learns what I've done.
See me shake my head, knowing that I would have done the exact same thing. So, and just as a heads up, this is our last episode before we go on a short break until around mid-October. So we are just going on a brief hiatus, but we will be back with more hands then. But let's kick this one off with a pretty fun one. This is actually a hand from a little while ago that I've been wanting to share, but I feel like I just haven't had the opportunity. But I'm excited to finally get to break this one out. It's a fun one because it's a limped pot, as always.
Ah, nice. So is this a 2-2 game, 2-5 game, or coming from the online home streets?
This is a 2-5 hand from Best Bet Orange Park, and it's a hand where it gets limped to us in the big blind.
Oh, and what's the effective stack? Just for
We're 600 effective with, I guess, the main villain.
Okay, perfect. Just something to toss in the tracker. So it limps all the way to us in the big blind, so we can have anything.
Exactly, and this is there's 4 limpers, so this is going to be a 5-handed game. It's everybody limps except the small blind and the under the gun +1.
So we're going to be out of position to all of the players. We don't even get the benefit of being in position to 1.
Correct. And we have good old 7-3 of clubs.
Nice, a premium from the big blind.
We have a suited hand, baby.
I mean, it doesn't even matter what we have. It's the big blind. We just get to check our option and flop a straight flush.
Yeah. So we do actually see a fairly nice flop, which is 10 of diamonds, 3 of diamonds, 3 of spades.
Wow, fairly nice. I mean,
we got trips, baby.
There is obviously a flush draw out there, a front door diamond draw, which, of course, knowing these small stakes live games, any one of the players could easily have any combination of diamond cards.
Correct.
And obviously, also, we could be a little bit concerned about any sort of 3x of hearts, although a little bit less likely given that it's the 3, but of course possible, but not really worried about a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm feeling okay. And so, sorry, just checking. Okay, yeah. So I check. I started with a check here, but I do wonder if that's correct. What do you think? Do you actually prefer to lead out here?
I kind of go back and forth either way. I do generally like checking, especially from the blind and limped pots. Like, it's kind of I feel like at this point it's almost like a bomb pot scenario where I'm pretty much always checking. Like, I've even checked dark from the small blind position in a bomb pot before, where it's just something like you can get put in such awful positions if like you bet and there's just like some crazy action behind you, and it's like nice to be able to check raise and not have to like bet and immediately blow the pot. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think that checking from out of position can never be wrong, and I think especially with so many opponents, it's totally fine to just check a ton of hands.
Yeah, I agree in principle. I guess my thought here is like I'm pretty sure I'm just okay to get felted here with like I want to take this hand to the felt, at 100, at basically 100 big blinds effective. So like even if the action goes crazy, like I think I'm just fine putting it in.
Yeah, I think that's fine too. Like I don't hate betting either. I guess in limped pots, I've also. And I guess it does depend, because like maybe this is a good board to bet because there's not that much stuff that our opponents will probably be betting, especially at sort of the stakes where opponents might not even be betting like good flush draws at a high frequency. But another actual benefit to checking is that if they do bet those hands, we get to put them in way tougher spots rather than just like betting 20 here where everyone's just going to call with whatever that people are not going to be put into tough spots. Whereas if someone bets 20 and we like pot it, then we're going to start applying a lot of pressure to our opponent's range, which I think is more in keeping with sort of the theory and how we've been trying to adjust our play over the last year or so.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I do ultimately. I think you've convinced me that I was correct in checking here. I mean, I sort of checked out of reflex because I usually just check when I'm out of position to a million people.
Yeah.
So,
Which is,
I did.
again, I don't think that can possibly be wrong.
Yeah. So, and especially because we want to take this pot to the street, so it'd be nice to be able to do that check raise and build the pot properly.
Right.
So
We're probably not going to get anyone to stack off if we just bet 3 times.
that's fair. Anyway, it checks around.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, maybe on a board like this, we are allowed to bet more just because, like, it's, I mean, people might not even bet tens all the time at these stakes, right? Like, you might not even see someone bet like 10-9. So maybe that's a bigger argument for betting because we can get called by like multiple people, and then we do kind of build a pot. So could probably go either way.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you've convinced me on it. I think I like the check, even though the outcome isn't what we wanted. I think I do like the check. So
Cool. Well. Does the turn keep it clean?
the turn is now the 8 of spades, so it does put a second flush draw out there and introduces some possible straight draws.
Okay.
And at this point, I decide I'm going to bet.
Okay.
I don't know if you think that's fair. I mean, I could check a second time and hope maybe now someone stabs with one of those introduced draws.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I think I could go either way. I'd either bet quite big here or check, because again, I do want to like pile money in, but obviously if it checks through again, it's really bad for us. Although I guess there's also an argument that if it checks through again, there probably aren't that many hands that we would otherwise get value from anyway. Because people will probably start betting their 10x. People will likely start betting a flush draw at some frequency. So I don't know. But I think betting is fine. I'm happy to kind of just throw out a pot size bet, given that it's a limped pot, and see what we can do.
Yeah, I actually go for a slight overbet here. I bet $30.
Perfect.
I mean, it's a limp pot, so whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I think you just got to bet big here, because otherwise people just will react as though you checked.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it folds to the hijack who calls and the button who calls. So we get two customers.
Okay. So, sounds good. So we got 115 in the pot at this point, and like a piles behind 5-1 SPR stack to pot ratio. So, how's the river looking?
The river rolls off the deuce of hearts.
Oh,
the big brickaroni.
Big brick pizza. Okay.
Yeah. And given that I got called twice, I think I like to bet again here, because I should be able to get called by one of these people.
That's I mean, our hand looks so much like a missed draw. It's another spot where we can probably go either way, but at low stakes, I definitely lean towards betting because all the draws missed and we don't have either of those draws. It's really likely that at least one of these guys is on either diamonds or spades. So given that, with all the draws bricking, I would guess that, from a theory perspective, it makes more sense to check, and then check raise even, just if, just to try and induce something, a bluff or a value bet from a worse hand. But bluffs and value bets from worse hands are not standard practice in the 2-5 Florida streets, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely something to be said for, trying to play balance here. And I think you're right that from a balance perspective, I think a check here is in order. But we're trying to adjust to our villains here. We're very passive villains. This was not the first limped pot at the table. Mm-hmm. So I just don't really expect them to go for it with a bricked draw here. And I do expect to get called by a 10, even for a large sizing. So I go ahead and I bet, basically pot, I bet 110.
Yep, I like a large sizing because our opponent's ranges are pretty much either like missed draws or one pair hands mostly, so it just puts them in a really, really tough spot with the one pair hands, and obviously they're not calling if they missed a draw for any sizing.
Yeah, so exactly. Do you think that I could bet, one thing I wondered immediately after this hand is, should I have actually overbet this river?
Possibly. I wonder if that lets... Yeah, I mean, possibly, because if our opponents are holding 10x without spades or diamonds, they probably are just like forced to call. But people do fold a lot to like super big bets, like as another sort of live adjustment. But I think I like going 110. I think that makes a lot of sense. Because
Yeah,
I don't think it's not like we have the nuts either. Like,
yeah, and I don't really like going doing overbetting in multi-way pots much anyway. So
yeah, and I would agree that overbetting multi-way out of position with like a pretty good hand is probably not what we want to be doing on two streets. And I kind of agree with you that last street barely counts as an overbet. 30
Right.
into 25 in a limped pot is just a bet. So I like your sizing here. I think I'd also like to go big, but not too big.
Okay. Well, the hijack quickly folds, and the button snaps me off. Absolutely snaps me off.
Okay, I would say that's a bad thing, but I don't think it is.
Well, what do you think you could have here?
I think maybe he's got a 3. Maybe he's got probably a better 3. I guess our kicker doesn't play, so all 3s are chopping or better. Maybe Button's got an 8. Maybe Button's got a 10. Maybe he like ran into deuces full on the river and just decided not to raise because of our sizing. Who knows? He could have pocket 7s if you've got a bluffy image.
Sure. Yeah, anyway, he has 8-3 of hearts for a boat.
And he doesn't jam.
He snap calls. Does not.
So, quick question. If the button had jammed the river, are you calling?
No.
Okay. Good. I would agree with that. I think when we bet big and then get jammed on, I would agree. So, yeah, congratulations on losing, the minimum.
The absolute minimum to being out-pipped here. Yeah, like I said, I'm generally happy to go to the felt with trips in a limped pot, but versus that would be a very nutted line from Villain. I think if we pot turn pot river and get jammed on,
yeah,
probably not a bluff.
And I think there's a difference too between like going to the felt like by check raising the flop, jamming turn versus like going bet and getting raised. Yeah, there's definitely a big difference. It's just so relevant to the SPR. No, I think well played overall. Maybe we could have bet the flop, maybe we could have check raised the turn, but I think you played it fine. And I think also this does allow us. That's a great. It's an interesting point that I think going with your line the way you've done it allows you to get away by the river, right? Like
if I'm up against.
If you happen to be up against a better hand, if you pot the turn and get raised, you're probably calling the turn, but then like folding the river if he jams.
Yeah, it's hard.
I think you just have to live, like, even if the draws brick. It depends on the reads you have on. I think it is very player dependent at that point. But
yeah, no reads on this particular villain except after this hand. I was like, okay, this guy never raises with. Well, I don't even know what he would raise with.
He also overlimped the button with 8-3 of hearts.
That's very true. Loose passive would be the tag I would assign this player.
I think loose passive would be quite fitting.
Yeah. So anyway, thought that was a little bit of a fun one.
Cool. I like it. I like a nice limped pot. But I've got none of them. No limped pots for you today. Okay. We are headed off to the 2-5 streets for both of these hands. I've been trying to play a little more 2-5 at Encore, Boston Harbor. I was fortunate enough to get called for the 2-5 list for a brand new table, which is always the dream. Because, when it's 8:30 p.m. and you get a new table, it's probably people who are there to play. And when if you get put onto a table of people who have played all day, probably not going to be as good a game. And the game was excellent. I would say there were a few folks who were definitely relatively knowledgeable players. One player indicated that he had randomized in some capacity, where he almost made a really, really sick laydown of trips against a river jam, but rolled the call, which that's life. But a really good game overall. I can't tell you how much money I won pre-flop because everybody folded to 3 bets.
Nice.
Like, how it is in these, like, it's like, oh, bet, raise, call, and I'm like, all right, I'll raise my, like, king, queen suited up, and everybody folds, like, adds up.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you mentioned once somebody said that they, like, calling call to 3-bet frequency in Florida is 100%, but it's not, so I don't have those experiences, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's that's funny. That's good. And then you can just like narrow your range and just go crazy. But anyway, in this particular hand, we're going to be about $1,000 effective, so 200 big blinds. It's worth noting this buy-in spread is, I believe, 200 to 1,000. It might be 300 to 1,000, but it plays quite deep. Most people had bought in for the maximum. I did not because I'm a little 1-3 shot taker. But it was, it usually plays quite deep. It's a good game. The straddle was on fairly often. And I've quite enjoyed my recent sessions at 2-5. I think the 2-5 at Encore Boston Harbor has kind of a bad reputation among the players there as being a little too reggy and nitty, but I haven't had that experience in my last couple sessions, so we'll see if my luck holds.
Well, good. All right. So, well, what's the effective stag in this hand?
So it's actually 1,000 basically.
Okay.
The guy to my right, hadn't played too much yet. But the hand is going to start with 2 limps from UTG and Hijack. The button raises to 20.
Okay.
The small blind calls. And I am in the big blind with Ace-6 of hearts. Which is not my favorite hand to squeeze with. But I think here I'm pretty well set up for it. Just because of the dynamics where I'm in the big blind, so I'm going to be out of position. If I call, the 2 limpers behind me are almost certainly going to call. And I have an opportunity to take it down here or maybe even like get it heads up with the flatter in position. So I decided to put in the squeeze to 80, which I realized after the fact was a little bit small.
Definitely small. I mean, I would think you want to go at least 100 here, but yeah, I do like a squeeze play with your specific hand. I mean, they do say from the big blind you are supposed to 3-bet in a more polar fashion. So you probably want to 3-betting suited aces more often than maybe you would from other positions. So yeah, makes sense to me.
Well, and I'd also say I do think kind of polarizing your big blind 3-betting range makes more sense when you're like heads up and or closing the action. Just because like you are like getting such a good price and you're guaranteeing that the action closes, and that etc. when you're calling in that fashion versus 3-betting, so you're a lot more incentivized to flat. Versus here, I'm kind of disincentivized because it would almost certainly go 5 ways to a flop, where we're out of position to most of the players.
Sure. So yeah, that's a fair point. So maybe you would want to just 3-bet more linearly, kind of pick most of your strongest hands to do it, and maybe you don't necessarily want to be flatting. You want to be 3-betting as much with a hand like Ace-6 suited. Not that you could never do it, but just something.
Yeah.
Something.
I mean, I could flat here. I wouldn't. I mean, it is worth noting that Ace-6 suited is a hand that plays reasonably well, like 5 ways. Just because obviously we can be dominated sometimes, flopping top pair, but you also have a lot of great implied odds with the heart draw. Obviously, so there are options.
It's a lot easier to get away from top pair 5 ways.
Yeah, and especially when that top pair is an ace, because people just love their aces, as we've opined time and time again here on Bankroll Burners.
Okay, so you make it 80.
Yep, and both limpers fold, but the button and the small blind both call.
Okay.
So we've got
like
about
250 in the middle.
Yep, 250 in the middle. And the flop is going to come out 8-3 deuce rainbow. We're looking at the 8 of clubs, the 3 of diamonds, and the deuce of spades. Not even a heart to be seen on this on this dry rainbow board, because it's not dry. It's not super dry, but it's fair. I would call it fairly dry.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have a bad hand for this specific board, but this board is very good for your range. Typically boards that are not really going to connect with anybody's range are much better for the 3-better. They're the sorts of boards where the 3-better is allowed to go quite large. So if you were going to bet here, you could take a larger sizing for multi-way. Maybe that would be half pot or 2/3 or something. But you can also check and just give up here, of course, or maybe you get to see a free turn. I don't know. What did you think?
I did think about betting, and I kind of thought, like, I don't know. I feel like I can bet, but I don't know that I have the best betting candidate. Like, I just have, if I'm gonna be betting with Ace-6 suited here, I feel like I may as well be doing it when I have a backdoor.
Yeah.
Similarly, like my ace high may be good occasionally. Like I might bink an ace, versus having a hand like Jack 10 is obviously never going to be good. It's got like a bit more equity multi-way if the like pair outs aren't good because you have a lot of backdoor draws. So I felt like this was a good candidate to check back, but I totally agree that had I bet, I would have tried to size up a bit, put maximum pressure on whatever medium pocket pairs the double flatter most likely has.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that the one issue is checking here, obviously, in the middle is if button bets, you're pretty much forced to fold, which is kind of a shame. But
Oh, and you know what? I actually did neither. I thought I checked here, but I did not. I bet 75.
Wow.
So forgive me for I was like, yeah, you're totally right. This is great. This is great strategy. And then I looked to see what I actually did, and it was simply not correct.
Yeah, I actually think this is like probably the worst line you can take here is just like bet small with all your hands on this board is like kind of not great. So
Yeah.
well done, good bait and switch.
Yeah, just when you all thought that as I moved to 2-5, that I'm going to start playing better. Shame on all of you, to our listeners who had that hope for me. But anyway, I do bet 75, and at least it does something as the button folds and then the small blind calls.
Very very good play then.
So
you've gained position with.
I have gained positions. There's 400 in the pot at this point, with about 850 left behind. And the turn is going to roll off the 10 of hearts, and the small blind checks again. So the board now is 8 of clubs, 3 of diamonds, deuce of spades, 10 of hearts. It's a total rainbow board. We're holding ace 6 of hearts, so just ace high. Really just ace high. Nothing else.
Yeah, it's interesting here. Like, I mean, when he calls, like, what's the best case scenario for his flop call? I guess, like, if we rewind before the turn comes out, like, what are you hoping that he called with?
I guess, like, I mean, the best possible case is like Broadway cards with like a backdoor draw. But I think the most likely case, especially kind of thinking about it with the benefit of kind of looking at the board, although not in the moment, is probably more likely that he's got some sort of pocket pair either above or below the 8. Since he flat called, I guess I think it's more likely to be below because he might raise like 9s or 10s or jacks on occasion, but. Probably pretty weighted towards pocket pairs. Maybe an 8.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I do think that him calling this relatively small sizing does limit the amount of strong hands he has. He may flat here with like pocket 8s specifically on occasion, but whatever.
Yeah.
That's a pretty small portion of his range. I think you're right that the vast majority of his range is going to be sort of middling strength pocket pairs and 8s. And probably not a lot of just like 2 Broadway overs that often.
One would think not so much. Maybe some ace high hands. If he's got like ace queen or ace jack or something, maybe those hands, especially with a backdoor, might continue. But when he checks to me, I mean, definitely talking about it now and realizing a lot of his range is going to be these sort of middling pocket pairs. I think betting here is definitely in order.
Well, I don't know. To be clear, like. I'm not necessarily saying it is, because I do think if you were going to bet, you should take it extremely large sizing. I do think, like, I mean, what is the pot right now? It's about 400, and you guys have
850.
850 behind, so it's about 2x pot. So you don't really, I guess you don't need to do an overbet here if you're going to go geometric. You just basically need to bet like 3/4 pot each street. But
yeah.
I mean, what you could do, it's a total rainbow board, so it doesn't really make a ton of sense to just like ship it. I mean, you could set this up as though you were going to triple barrel, even if you don't actually. But if you could set it up where you would have a sort of geometric sized jam on the river. So the question is like, does your hand, okay, like if you want to bet 3/4 pot, like does your hand want to bet 3/4 pot? Is it the best candidate to do that with? I mean, you are blocking pocket 6s.
Yeah, and I think to that point, it's probably better to do with like our own suited broadways as bluffs, because like I think to your point, I kind of agree that he probably doesn't have that many in his range, which and so we do kind of want to weight him towards having those medium pocket pairs, and also
and towards having ace high, which we're also blocking. So we're blocked because he can have ace high. So we're blocking him from having both the ace highs and some of these lower pocket pairs. So we might have a pretty bad bluff candidate.
right. That's fair. Like maybe and a hand like I mean I think our best bluff here is definitely like Queen Jack suited because it has equity. It blocks any 10x that he might have continued with, and also it is weak at showdown and unblocks all the pocket pairs and ace high hands.
Yeah, but I honestly think you could barrel here with like probably most king queens, queen jack type holdings. I think you could barrel here with, I don't know, like if you had. Well, I mean, you need more bluffs than just that. So
well, I'd also rather if I'm going to start bluffing ace highs, I would also rather start with ace 4 and ace 5 at least, or even ace deuce and ace 3 hands that at least have a few more outs.
Mm-hmm. And or I also think like your ace king and your ace queen and your ace jacks are just better. They're in some respects like
more equity also.
I mean, they have more equity, and they unblock some of these middling pocket pairs we're hoping that he has. So I do think that we can have a lot of bluffs here, and we don't need to. I think we can just give up with ace-6. I think it's fine.
Yeah, and I do decide to check back. I didn't. This is very helpful because I don't think I went through this whole great thought process in the moment. I was more thinking like, well, this board like sucks. I don't really think that like I'm gonna get. I don't know if I'm gonna get a ton of credit, which is not really how I should be thinking about it. But and let me just make sure I did actually check back this time.
All right, no double check raise from from here. You double check raise the viewers. They think they know what you're gonna do, but then you surprise them. 2 hands, 2 streets in a row.
Well, good to go a street without a blunder, but fear not, as the river rolls off the 3 of spades, so it pairs the 3. The final board is now 8, 3, deuce, 10, which was all rainbow. River rolls off a final 3. We are holding ace 6 of hearts, and we get check 2 once again.
Seems like a pretty standard check back to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair.
I mean, look, what hands would you play this way for value, and then what sizing would you take with those hands? I guess like we can ask ourselves that.
Right. I mean, I guess the first question is like, right, what hands would we go this way for value? Because then we'll have to find some bluffs that we wanted to check through on the turn and then, bet the river. It is probably a very small. I don't know. It's weird. Like
9-8 suited and 8-7 suited, you could play this way, and you should bet river with them. I think.
Yep, I think that's a good point. Definitely any sort of 8, maybe even ace 8 suited.
Yep, absolutely. So, and you're not going to be taking a particularly large sizing with those hands. I mean, at equilibrium, you probably want to take a half pot sizing. So, if you were going to bet them, I'm thinking if. Would you, in the against the live player pool, would you adjust with those hands and take a smaller sizing exploitatively to try to get called by more crap?
I think I'd probably bet on this. I think I'd probably bet around half pot. I just think that makes a lot of sense to kind of bet half pot with all kind of bet small with all our hands here, just because our opponent's range is so face up, which I definitely realize at this point, looking back at it, like this hand just has to be a pocket pair, like when he goes
or an ace high,
right? So I guess the question is, do we have hands that we check back the turn that are better bluff candidates than our current
hand? Well, we kind of outlined those hands that we would want to bet turn with. So we said like our king queens and our queen jacks and probably our ace jacks, and then some ace queen and ace king. And I would say your ace queen and ace king. Sometimes you can just check back and win with those.
Right. This hand is probably not checking back and winning. It can't. Right. It can only check back and chop at best, basically.
Yeah. I mean, unless he has like just something absolutely bizarre.
Right. Sure. If he's got 4 or 5 suited, of course we win. But of course that hand also folds to a bet.
Yeah. So, I guess the more I think about it, I mean, you want him to have ace highs, but you probably a lot of the hands you show up here with, I mean, that you check back, like, you probably have like some king jack maybe that maybe you probably want to bet king jack. So I don't know, maybe this is the right candidate to take for a river bluff if you're gonna like. What are your I guess here's a question: what candidates are your total give ups? You're giving up on the turn, and you're definitely not going to try river. Like, what's that? What would that be?
I mean, maybe those should be like the ace three, ace deuce hands. So like, obviously the board paired here, so we'd be betting ace three for value. But maybe a hand like ace deuce, where we do beat like all his unpaired hands. But I don't know. Like maybe that hand shouldn't be bluffed on the turn, and instead it should be just check check. It should be played as a check check because it has like.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, what are the hands that we want to play as a check check?
Right, and I'm saying maybe like ace deuce.
Okay, yeah, but okay, sure, but maybe you want to bet ace deuce in the turn as a bluff. So
right, exactly. So
I don't know. It's really hard to sort of like, this is challenging. I mean,
turn checking ranges are just so weird.
Yeah, I think you probably wanted to go check back ace king and ace queen here a lot. I think you would probably check those on the turn sometimes and then check them again on the river. I don't think you would go for it on the river. So that's something. You're like, maybe if you had like a jack nine type of hand, if you wanted to check back to try to realize your equity and then you just give up, I don't know.
Which might be a titch loose for me.
Yeah.
Even for me, as a squeeze. Maybe sometimes.
So I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's not that many hands you show up here with on the river that you check back the turn with that are like absolute garbage. So maybe this one's a fine one to bluff with. It's certainly a better one to bluff with than ace king and ace queen, because you almost never can win with it. So I'm cool if you want to bet half pot here.
In retrospect, I think it probably makes sense to check the flop with our specific holding, and use better candidates to bet. And then maybe, if this sort of turn disconnected 10 comes, maybe then we're supposed to start bluffing with our hand. Well, then it's still multi-way, so I don't know. Maybe this is just a board where, given that we're three ways, we just kind of give up from the beginning.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Anyway, what does villain do?
So I bet 225, which is just a titch over half pot. Mm-hmm. And I got snap called by pocket sixes.
Wow.
So, yeah, we just got absolutely owned. It was a fun hand. We just got our soul read. This is a guy who I had told before the session that I was going to bluff him, because he sat next to me and he was like, "Hey, I won't bluff you if you don't bluff me." And I was like, "I'm definitely going to bluff you."
Wow. All right, so you gave it away. I mean, yeah, it's interesting thing about like, what are the hands that are definitely going to fold to or most likely to fold to our river bet are actually like ace highs. So I guess the curious thing is, do we ever end up here with hands that do not contain an ace that we check turn with and then want to go for it on the river? That's sort of the interesting question, is like,
right, it's just weird because of the composition of the board. There's no like flush draws, so maybe it is like a jack nine or something like that.
Yeah, but like that's too few hands. I don't know. I'm just having trouble thinking of like, what is the class of hand that's like, oh, you totally want to be going for it on the river here.
After checking back turn is the hardest part, right? Because there are plenty of hands where we're like, yeah, we definitely want to go for it the whole way. Like a hand like Queen Jack, that just has so many favorable qualities going for it as like a multi-street bluff where you just want to go for it throughout.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one, honestly. I genuinely do not know, but cool hand.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I just got totally owned, which I'm sure that our listeners love hearing and get to hear quite often.
Yeah, you got owned. I mean, it is fair for him to call you down with a lot of pocket pairs there.
Oh, I agree. Once I check back the turn, and that's just why it's important to have some value there, like, and to be bet. I mean, that's why it's so important to bet like 8x if we show up with 8x, right? Like this should illustrate why that should just be a mandatory bet.
Absolutely, it is. I think it is a serious mistake to check back 8x on that.
Yeah,
on that route. So. Okay. Cool. Well, I have a hand that I have been thinking about for days. This hand is one of the strangest hands I've played in terms of like, yeah, I'm just very excited for this hand. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, I really don't know how I did this. So this is a 2-2 hand. And we are 335 effective with the main villain. We're 8-handed.
And this is why we play at Best Bet Jacksonville.
This is at Best Bet Jacksonville. Yeah, so that's a $300 cap on the 2-2 game. We are 7-handed here. this we are in the big blind. And this is going to start off with a limp from under the gun, who's going to be the main villain here. We've been playing for a few hours. I have bluffed him a lot. I don't think he knows. He always asks me if he was good, and I say no, you could fold. So I don't know what he thinks, but
Yeah.
he's told me that he's made some, like, he folded top pair once to my like turn check raise. So he definitely is a sort of a scared player, I guess.
Yeah, I've gone into the school of thought where unless I show a bluff to, like, rile up the table or something, that I always say good fold, or like someone says, "What do you have?" And my go-to response is two pair, because like they'll always believe it. You say like, "What do you have?" "Oh, two pair." "Oh, okay." "Oh, nice fold." So it's always fun to play that game a little bit, unless I'm like really trying to own someone when they like just make a dejected fold and I just have to shove it in their face.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes you do need to show bluffs, but I hadn't had a good reason to show bluffs to this guy. But anyway, I think he had sort of caught on to what I was doing. Maybe I didn't have like direct proof of that, but I had been caught bluffing a couple other people.
Okay.
And so I don't know. I don't know what he's thinking, but I know he's sort of a scared player. That's all I have on him. So he limps. There's a middle position limp. And sorry, no, that's wrong. He limps, the button limps, and the small blind checks because it's 2-2. No, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. There's also a middle position limp. Jeez. So there's
a total of 4 other players in the hand when the action gets to you.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I was like. I wrote my notes very cryptically. But that's the situation. So there's an under the gun limp, a middle position limp, a button limp. The small blind checks, and it's on me. And I have Queen Jack of Hearts. And I elect to raise this hand.
Yep, I think that's standard and what I would also be doing. Queen Jack off, probably checking a lot.
Definitely checking Queen Jack off. Unless I really thought the table was doing a lot of folding, but they were not. So... This
okay, and how much do we make
it? Happy table. What's that?
How much do we make it?
We make it 20.
Yep, sounds good.
Standard open 10 plus there's 4 limps. So
tons and tons of limpers.
Yeah.
Yep.
Under the gun calls next to act. The middle position player folds. The button calls and the small blind calls.
So we're on 4 ways at this point. So we've only shed 1 person.
Correct. The small blind, no reads on them. The button is a loose passive player, and that's loose with a capital L. He once limp called like 8-3 off and made a ton of money from his 2 pair. So dude can have anything here. So okay. Flop is gonna come out an interesting one. It's 8 of diamonds, 8 of clubs, 5 of hearts.
Cool. So we got 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw.
And a backdoor straight draw.
Yeah.
And I go ahead and the small blind checks. And I check as well. I think I can bet this board probably a reasonable amount, but I actually think my hand plays better not as a bet necessarily here. I think it would be a shame to bet and get raised with a particular holding.
Yeah, I'm happy to check out of position for sure. I mean, and this is also a good reason for checking some strong hands, like when we have an 8, just to protect our checking range in a similar way. Very happy to check here. Again, It's also multi-way. Like, heads up, I think we can definitely bet this board more. Probably still not betting it all the time, especially from out of position, but more. But multi-way, there can definitely be a lot of 8x running around, like 8-3 offsuit from the button, for example.
Yeah. So, I'm playing this as a check evaluate. I'm going to kind of see what happens here, and the under the gun player goes ahead and bets 25 into $80.
Yep.
And it folds all the way back to me, and I elect to simply call here with intentions of making him some moves in the turn, potentially, depending on the turn.
Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense because this is the kind of a spot where I'm happy to call, just because we kind of have a good a pretty easy sort of evaluate on the turn, just to kind of see what happens. If we pick up some amount of equity, pretty easy to like put in a raise, whether it's for value or a bluff. If we whiff equity, like we can just make an easy fold, or maybe it even goes check check. Like this, the turn should be relatively straightforward to evaluate, especially if this guy is a pretty ABC player.
Yeah, and by the way, this guy, I've seen him bluff too, so he can definitely have, he can have some bluffs here. He probably doesn't have that many because he's betting to 3 people, but this dude, I've seen him bluff. So.
Sure, could definitely have a hand like 6-7.
Sure, absolutely. So I go ahead and check and call, and the turn rolls off the 3 of hearts.
Okay,
so we do pick up our backdoor.
Nice.
And I check to him, and he now bets 45, so he does size up a decent amount from his previous bet. Still quite small relative to the size of the pot. Obviously, I might even be getting direct odds to call with my flush draw here. Let me think about this. Probably not quite, but close.
Probably not quite. Yeah, I would agree. But yeah, we pretty much need like 20% equity, and we have. We might have more than that too, because our overcards might be live.
Yeah, I do elect to play this as a check raise with the intention of setting up a river jam, even though I will not. There's a large number of rivers I will not jam with this specific holding. I do want to set up the river jam in case I want to go for it, in case I make my hand, and also for reasons of disguising my strategy, such that I tend to always try to set up river jams when it makes sense. So I do elect to go for a check raise here, if you think that's reasonable.
I do, yeah. I think that we do need. Well, the interesting thing is, I feel like you're going to be check raising a lot of your strong hands on the flop. So what kind of hands are you thinking? What kind of hands do you think you'd play this way for value, where you sort of check call the flop and then check raise the turn?
That's interesting. So I do think pocket 5s if I play it this way, probably. Okay. Although I probably don't raise pocket 5 pre-flop that much.
Yeah.
Probably more often I don't. I would say probably aces might do this way. I would say at least sometimes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you're all right. I guess there's not that many hands. Like I guess I would do it with some over pairs. Like possibly, I might do it with like 10s maybe too. If the turn kind of bricks out here.
Yeah, I'm just thinking hands like 10s through kings or even 9s through kings. We probably want to lean more towards check raising the flop for, sort of a value and protection type bet. Whereas with aces, I totally agree. Aces makes a lot of sense to play this way, where there aren't really any scare cards.
Yeah. And I don't really... I think kings is probably fine to just call with 2 for the most part, because he probably isn't playing that many, like, ace-x this way. So
yeah, except like... yeah.
Really worried about an ace coming off. So, yeah, I think that's fair. I think in game, I was thinking, like, I will have some overpairs this way. I do think occasionally I might check call an 8. If it was like an 8 where I really didn't have to worry about anything, like if it was like ace-8 maybe or something like that, I might just.
And you would have some ace-8 suited for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know, not a ton of hands, but I do think that there are some. But you might be right that like it's a weird line for that reason. That like, why wouldn't I just check raise flop?
Yeah, and then I'm kind of thinking if we don't have that many value hands, then maybe our hand isn't like if we're bluffing this hand, maybe we're leaning towards over bluffing. But I guess I don't. Probably not. We only have a few better bluffs. Like I definitely would rather be raising here with like 6-7 of hearts, like 10-9 of hearts, hands that kind of have better blockers for the 8. But I think that our hand, and especially because the 8 of hearts is not accounted for, right?
Correct.
So that means blocking hands like 9-8 of hearts, 10-8 of hearts get some importance. But with that being said, that's only like 2 combos of hands.
Yeah.
So this hand probably still does fit squarely into bluffs because it sounds like we definitely have enough value.
Yeah, we have not a ton of value, but we do have some hands, and we do. I don't really know what better bluff candidates besides, like, I think Jack 10 and 10-9 of hearts are better. I do think I would probably, I think most combos of 6-7, even without a heart, would just be better.
Yeah, well, I might even think then maybe 10-9 and Jack 10 of spades are even better. Whatever, I think it's, spades, the other suit that is not represented in the 8. Maybe just blocking our opponent from having a lot of 8x is where, just kind of puts so many of their hands in a tough spot.
Yeah, I mean, but, we do need a decent amount of bluffs here. So I'm fine with it. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's probably fine. Mostly just splitting hairs, but just trying to poke at what other bluffs might be out there. But that said, I mean, obviously our hand is never good at showdown, or very, very rarely good at showdown, and it should have quite a bit of equity. So happy to put in the raise here. So how much do you make it to set up for the river jam?
So this is a live misclick. I only make it 95. I meant to make it. I actually said 100 after I'd already put my chips out. I thought it was 100. The dealer counted them, but what I really think should have done was 110. I think that was the right size.
Okay, yeah, because if we made it 110, then there'd be like 200 left, and there'd be like 350 in the pot. So and the 110 would basically be a half pot size raise, or no, like a third pot. Yeah, I don't know. I think
maybe even a little bigger, like 120.
Yeah, maybe even a little bigger might be right.
Yeah, it was too small for sure, but alas, sometimes we make sizing errors.
I mean, do you think we can just jam here?
I did want to ask you that. Do you think we can just jam here?
Because if after we call the 45, a jam would not be an overbet by much.
Right,
a pot size raise would be, I think, 265 ish, and we only have 315 behind, so maybe a jam makes sense, but then of course if we're jamming, I think we would want to probably lower the number of combos that we're doing that with. So I'm not sure if this is a hand to jam.
Hold on. If we're betting larger, we're supposed to bluff more.
Right. But we should have fewer overall combos.
Right. Well, this is a question: is like, are we splitting the turn here?
Right.
Are we having multiple turn sizings here, or are we always? Is there just like, this is the thing that I don't really like about jamming. Thinking about this is like, it really sort of handcuffs us versus his sizing, because it's really like, what am I going to do? Fold versus this sizing when I have equity? No, but like, also check calling is just awful.
Right.
So,
yeah. So
I think jamming really handcuffs a lot of our hands into like being forced to like check call.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's some way we can like do a 2 sizing scheme where like we're jamming with like our 8x hands and hands that like have really good blockers for the 8, and then we make a smaller raise with like other flush draws and like our overpairs. But that's also like bad. Like, that's kind of exploitable, because if we're never raising small with an 8, then
well, I wouldn't be worried about getting exploited there. With
no,
that.
and we can probably use like pocket 5s and maybe in like the small raise scheme also, because if we kind of build the jam scheme around 8x, right, and say we want 8x and blockers to 8x, and small raises around everything else where we have super thick value like boats, and then we have a lot of thin value and a lot of like other, miscellaneous bluffs. Maybe that so. As we continue to talk through it, then I think the small raise makes even more sense with Queen Jack.
Yeah, I think jamming is weird. I really do. But to the point though about like what we were talking about earlier, then again, what we were talking about earlier with how few hands I actually take this line with, maybe it is better to just like, well, look, if I'm only going to show up here with like partials of aces, partials of kings, and 8x, some 8, like partials of 8x, maybe like freaking just rip it in. Maybe that's the answer,
Right. That it could be. Yeah. I think that could make sense, and then we'd really have to do a combo analysis. But I would expect that this hand still makes it in, most likely. Although I'd still rather jam with like 6-7. I'd obviously rather jam with 9-10, Jack 10 of hearts, but that's only like 6 combos, and we probably do need more bluffs.
Yeah. No. So, maybe jamming is the way. But I don't jam. Instead, I make a small raise setting up for the river jam. And he thinks for a bit and calls.
Okay. So there's like 320 in the pot, and there's like 220 left behind.
There should be 195 left behind.
Okay.
So I don't know if I screwed up math somewhere, but there should be 195 left behind.
That's okay. Either way, there's basically 200-ish or behind, and a titch over 300 in the pot. And what's the river?
The river is a very interesting queen of clubs.
Okay. What
do you like here?
Oh, it's weird. It's definitely a weird spot. I mean, my immediate instinct is sort of I either want to jam or I like want to check fold. Like I don't really like check calling here. It's kind of like what like Crush Life Poker likes to talk a lot about. It's sort of like Fifth Street chicken, but not quite. But it's like one of these things where we're out of position. This card should be good for our range, and if we check and our opponent jams at us, it just feels like
it's how could we ever be good, right?
Right. It's like how are they making this play, especially like someone who maybe is a little bit more on the loose passive side, doesn't necessarily have the guts to make it, or not even the guts, but it doesn't have it in their strategy to make like creative bluffs on cards that are bad for them.
Especially because there's not really any missed brick draws he shows up here with.
Yeah, especially when we've got Queen Jack of Hearts.
Yeah.
So, but that said, I mean, if we jam, we're basically the only hand that really should beat us is an 8, and I feel like we do get called by a lot of worse hands. Like basically any pocket pair above the 5, I feel like should call us.
But I don't know if he's betting those hands on the turn, and I also don't know if this specific player is calling with those hands.
Right.
The history.
Well, then maybe check folding just makes the most sense here.
Yeah, I mean, my thought in game was that he definitely could have 9s and 10s. That was my thought in game.
Yeah.
And I do think we get called by 9s and 10s probably a lot, if not always. But I don't know that he has 6s and 7s, and even if he does, I don't think we get called by them. So the question is there enough others, like, is that enough worse hands to call us? I mean, that's 12 combos of hands that can call us. Is that enough?
Right, and how many 8x does he have? I mean, how loose is this player pre-flop? How many 8x is he limp calling?
I don't really know. Like, I didn't know at this point anyway.
Like if he's calling 8-7, 8-6, 8-9, 8-10, then that's like 8 total combos. So then, right, 4 each of suited hands of hearts and spades.
It's still a profitable bet, though, I think.
Right. If those are the only hands that he's sort of calling with, then yes, that would make the most sense. So then I guess we just got to go for it if that's the case.
I mean, I guess like pocket 5s is also a possibility. We have to consider that.
So there's 3 combos of pocket 5s. That's 11 combos that beat us, and it's 12 combos that we beat.
But we also are betting less. We're not betting pot, so we don't even have to be good half the time.
Right.
For it to be.
So I guess then I mean based on that.
Yeah, I don't know. But on the other hand, like I feel like checking to check fold, but.
And the other thing is, I mean, is he always betting 9s and 10s on the turn? It seems like probably not this player, and it may even fold it occasionally on the river to this overcard.
Right, so it starts to get a little hairier.
It starts to look kind of like a break-even play either way.
In which case, when it's break-even, you're supposed to go with the exploit, which I think would be to check fold against this particular villain.
Right, because we think he might not pay us off enough.
Right.
And we can definitely fold, because he probably just doesn't have these bluffs in his range. So yeah, I think based on that, I think it makes more sense to just check fold and be sad about it when he shows us pocket 10s.
Yeah. I mean, if we check fold and get shown pocket 10s, like we're gonna feel like absolute morons.
But I don't think there's any way he bets pocket 10s on this river.
No. I'm sorry. If it goes check and we win, and he goes pocket.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yes. I mean, we will, but it's like if you think about the combos, if he's wide enough to be playing suited one gappers, which seem he might
probably
be, right? Probably if he's loose passive, then he's got 11 combos that beat us, 12 combos that we beat. He might, and then it kind of starts devolving a little bit. So I think I probably want to check fold here.
Yeah, I think that if I were a better player, I would have check folded, but I did jam.
I probably would jam too in real time.
Mm-hmm. And he goes into the tank.
That's a good sign.
So I'm like, all right, he's got nines or tens. And then he goes, what do you have? Pocket queens? And I go, oh my freaking God, I am being slow rolled.
Knit roll.
I'm being knit rolled. Anyway, he calls and flips over 10-8 offsuit.
Wow. Well, I mean, now we know. I mean, now that you know that, then it's like, well, he's definitely got plenty of combos.
If I had known he can have offsuit eights here, like there's never a way that this should be bet. So,
in either way, you would feel gross because honestly, there is a high chance that you check and he checks back, and then you show Queen Jack thinking you're just always good, and then you aren't.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually like almost certainly what I almost. Like, this player probably doesn't even freaking bet his
right, like that might feel grosser than getting tank called. You know, you went for it here and you failed. It would probably feel grosser for him to check back and show you a better hand.
Yeah, absolutely sickening. Yeah. Well, anyway.
So I think you played that hand fine. I mean, I think that there are a couple. I think that's a very marginal spot. I think all those spots could kind of go either way. And so I think that is kind of, you know, you can't lose too much sleep over that.
Yeah, I also think if I size my check raise properly, the jam starts to become quite more appealing again. Given that we are giving ourselves the odds we're giving ourselves with our jam.
Such a good price. Yeah, and we're giving him such a good price, so that also means he probably has to call with nines and tens.
Yeah, so I do think that it was definitely a relevant sizing mistake on the turn. The result would have, of course, been the same, but... I do think that was a bit of a blunder on my part on the turn.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense, but I do think as is, it's not much we can do to avoid it.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's my hand.
Perfect. Well, on to the last hand. This is in the same 2-5 session at Encore Boston Harbor. We're playing about 1.1k effective, 1100 in this pot. And Hero looks down under the gun at Ace of Diamonds, Queen of Hearts. Of course, this is going to be an open. We open to 20, which is more or less the standard size. Some people are going 15, some going 20. Just depends. I've been going 20 because people are, 15 is going 5 ways to the flop.
I mean, that's sort of the thing. It's like, I actually really do prefer to use smaller open sizing if you can. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if people will fold to a 3x open, I really like to do it, and I try to look for those tables where you can, because you give yourself more depths, and like, a lot of the theory we study, your edge is just so much bigger, deeper stack. So it's better to play at higher SPRs if you can. So.
And of course, we are playing quite deep in this game anyway, so 15 or 20 probably won't make a huge difference to SPR. I agree, it makes a lot of sense to go small, but I usually wind up going big just because I know that, like, nobody respects a 3x raise in live poker.
Right. Yeah, typically not. So.
And actually, as it turns out, no one respects a 4x raise either, as UTG +1, MP, button, and big blind all call. So we get 4 callers. We are out of position to 3 of them.
Mm-hmm. And you have Ace of Diamonds, Queen of Hearts.
Yep, we've got Ace Queen offsuit, Red Ace Queen offsuit. The pot is going to be a nice meaty $100 pot right away.
So you got 10 SPR.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, clearly I need to go even bigger.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes.
The flop is going to come out really interesting. It's King of Clubs, Queen of Spades, 10 of Diamonds.
Ooh.
So it's a very sopping wet triple Broadway board. And we're sitting here with second pair top kicker.
Out of position to 3 people, no less.
Yep, big blind checks, and I couldn't check any faster.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting. Like, this might be one of those rare scenarios where if you are gonna bet, you actually can take like a genuinely large sizing, like 3/4 into 4 people.
Oh, well, I think that makes sense because like a lot of the times when we're gonna want to bet, we're gonna have hands that are just so good from a blocking perspective. And what I mean by that we're going to have hands like Ace Jack, which like unblocks every pair or 2 pair that our opponents can have. We're going to have hands like Pocket Queens and Pocket Tens, which aren't going to contain a king. Like, those are going to be the hands that we want to be betting for value that are just have such great like unblocking properties that just mean we just get to bomb.
And I also think you can take pocket aces this way, at least at these stakes. So.
Yeah. Yeah, possibly. I might still check pocket aces sometimes. Definitely
Yeah.
ace. I mean, maybe ace king too. Might be because there's
I
no
think ace
real.
king would be a good check.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we
But
check, and it actually winds up checking all the way around.
see, this is why I hate. This is why I hate multi-way pots because like I don't even feel good about our hand anyway.
And the turn is going to come a relative brick. It's a 6 of diamonds, so it does introduce a backdoor diamond flush draw. We are holding the ace of diamonds.
Okay, and the flop is a king queen 10 with a flush draw with
No,
the
it's
spade.
king queen 10 rainbow.
Oh, rainbow.
And
I'm
so
sorry.
the 6 introduces one flush draw. It's just the diamond flush draw. We do not have that flush draw, but we do have the ace of diamonds. And the big blind checks once again, and I still think there's nothing for me to do but check here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I actually think you're probably like the odds that you're good here are, I think, astronomically low. I actually think like we almost never have the best hand. Even like with second pair top kicker, like I think the odds. I think so many people are gonna have kings here. Uh, I mean, I actually think like the odds that at least one of them has a king is pretty good. But it's so weird. Like if it bets if someone bets and it folds to us, like do we call? Do we check raise? It's as a bluff. Like it's pretty weird. But anyway, okay.
Well, I check, and the UTG player bets 40. And that's the next act after me, or UTG plus 1, I should say. And it folds back to us.
Well, this is a really small size.
Yeah, and of course he is betting into 4 other players. And he, of course, does not have any kind of nut advantage to speak of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I'm not saying he necessarily has to take a big size, but yeah, it's weird. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? What were you thinking at the time?
I'll tell you what I was thinking at the time. I thought, $40, I have a pair.
Well,
and like, this is a pretty strong hand given that I checked the flop. Like, yes, I do think I should be checking like ace king and aces sometimes on the flop, but still, like,
I think you should probably check ace king most of the time. Aces sometimes. Always pocket kings, obviously.
Yeah.
King queen is probably checked on the flop.
I might bet king queen on the flop some amount of the time.
Yeah, probably sometimes king 10, sometimes queen 10, sometimes. Like they're probably all mixed, but I actually do think you can show up here with like lots of strong hands. Bottom line.
Yeah, and I obviously some of those I do want to start raising with for value, like the kings, the king queens, the king tens. I think I can probably raise, like put in a small raise.
You probably just call with ace king a lot.
Yep, call with ace king. But that said, it's such a small rate. It's such a small bet too. We don't need to. I mean, we need like to be good less than 1 in 4 times here. You know, we're
That's
calling
true, and
40
yeah, we
for-
probably are good one.
And like if he's ever bluffing, like I often like to kind of think about this spot where, and I think we've gone through a scenario similar to this before, where I'm kind of thinking, you know, yes, he can obviously have a bunch of king x hands, but he can't have that many king x hands. Like the only king x hands that I feel like he would check on the flop are hands like king jack and king 9. Like I feel like king queen and king 10, most people are gonna bet.
It's true. He probably can have a sliver of ace king himself, knowing live players.
Yes, actually, that's funny. This particular player is a reg who, you know, clearly thought he was quite good and made some bizarre comments at times. And one of the reason I bring that up is because he specifically said, "I don't play ace king that way. I like to play ace king very passively."
Ah, wow.
Because it is a drawing hand.
A true scholar.
It is a drawing hand, you know.
Okay, so we've got a scholar who can have ace king. Very good.
And you know, he was a genuine pleasure to play with. He was a nice guy, and we had a good time. But that said, I did have to chuckle internally a bit. So you know, if you saw my new card protector and you're here on this podcast, welcome. Raise ace king.
Yeah, you should raise ace king, but we love you. You don't, do it, play it your way. So you should never take our advice for any reason. Obviously your best bluffs here are like jack 10 and pocket jacks. So I'm not saying you need to raise here. I mean, I think you could probably just call, like you said, you're getting reasonable odds. I would be curious what your plan is on like brick rivers. I mean, if the river's a brick and it goes check check, you will win sometimes, a decent amount probably. What happens if the river is a brick and he bets like a medium sort of bet?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I might I might try. I might call sometimes. It probably depends. I think my particular hand, if the river bricks, is probably a fold because I have the ace of diamonds, so I'm blocking any nut flush draws. That might be some bluffs that he's taking. Right? I mean, that kind of would be my thought on a brick river.
Yeah, I mean, usually when you have the nut blocker, flush blocker, it's a very good card to take for a bluff on the turn because you block their auto calls, because they're basically always going to call your check raise with a nut flush draw. So you block them from having that auto call. You also do block some ace king with your and you block pocket queens. Like, you actually have like a reasonable hand to but on the other hand, you're beating nut flush draws, so it actually doesn't even matter. So anyway,
yeah, I have hands like ace 10. I have hands like, jack 10 as queen jack. That might make more, might make more sense as bluffs. I don't know, but I guess queen jack and ace queen are pretty similar.
Yeah, they're pretty similar. I don't know. I'm always like reaching for bluffs because I think it's important, especially on the turn. But
yeah,
but no, I think it's fine to just call. I can't think of any reason not to just call. I was trying, but I can't. So yeah, just call.
Well, I just call. Yeah. So there's 180 in the pot. There's still piles left behind. It'll be tough to play for it all. And the river is going to come off the 3 of diamonds, completing the backdoor flush. And I check. I don't think I'm ever leading here.
Never? Never? You want to rep the flush? I don't know. You probably have very few suited hands. So yeah, sure. Okay.
I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to lead here. And I think I'd probably take my nut flush draws as a check raise for sure.
Fair.
Yeah, okay. I think that taking those flush draws for a check raise just makes a lot of sense on the turn. And he bet 70. So I check and he bet 75.
This is a very small bet.
Yeah.
I believe in theory you're supposed to rip it in here. I'm pretty sure.
Like jam?
Like jam, yeah.
Wow.
Because he's not supposed to do this, right? He's literally like, when you're this deep, you are never supposed to bet less than half pot on the river, and he's betting way less than half pot.
He's not betting. He's betting 75 into 180. Half pot would be around 90.
Okay, you're right.
So he's betting close to half pot, and it may have just been a convenience thing where he picked up a few greens and chucked them in.
Yeah, I think the other reason he's not supposed to do this though is because your hand, like your range is like, you are not like, when you just check flop and check call turn, you can't really have, you're not going to have a lot of strong hands. You may have some like absolute nutter butters like kings that you play this way, or ace jack you may be slow playing, or you're going to have hands like you have.
Yeah, but I don't think I want to rip in a hand like, I think ripping in kings or ace jack on a flush completing river would be an overplay. No,
not when he takes the sizing though.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. What sizing are you against your range? Where, like, I'm pretty sure he's supposed to bet pretty big because your range is just supposed to be like pretty mid heavy. Like, you will have some really strong hands, but your range isn't polarized. It's mostly pretty weak hands, like you have, and he is supposed to, put a ton of pressure on you.
Right, because when I check the flop and then check call the turn, it looks like my range has, as you said, some amount of like super trappy traps. Like maybe I play like ace jack of diamonds, right? This way,
sure.
For example, like a hand like just like the absolute coconuts, right?
Yeah.
As we like to call it. So, but I agree. For the most part, you'd think it's going to be mostly one pair of hands like ace queen, maybe even like ace 10.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I'd call ace 10. Maybe hands like hands like that, right? Maybe like even King Jack, I'm not feeling like King Jack suited. I'm not feeling super happy about.
But you probably call. So like
Right.
I guess when he does this, it just seems like he doesn't have that strong of a hand himself.
Right, but if that's the case, isn't like Ace Queen like ahead of some of those not very good
No.
hands?
What is it ahead of that he's like, except for his bluffs? But I feel like he would take his bluffs for a big sizing though. Like this is sort of like I feel like this is telegraphing like King X.
Right. I mean
I
that
feel
could
we're
make
just
sense.
gonna
Like
call
King
and
X,
lose
no
to King
diamond.
X. Yeah. Like Ace King, maybe King Queen. That's uncomfortable with the flush getting there. King Jack, um, Queen 10, maybe. I don't know. King 10, but I don't know. It's weird. I feel like you're supposed to just like you do block his auto calls. Like that's the thing. The reason my instinct was that you're supposed to jam is when the flush completes, okay, then his auto calls are all, ace X of diamonds. He can't have it, right? So
Right.
you absolutely prevent him from having that hand. And so no matter what happens when you jam, he's like, no matter what he's holding, he's going to be in a tough spot when you jam.
Right. It's just interesting because like I felt like in the moment, my hand does have value where it like beats all his bluffs. Like I get once again getting quite a good price. And I was just kind of like, well, I mean, I feel like, if he ever like overvalues a hand that he's just going for like some super weird thin value with like Queen Jack or something like that. Like obviously that's like that would be a suspicious play, but also like if he's ever bluffing, like.
But what are the bluffs? I'm sure he is ever bluffing, but like, what are the bluffs though? And also, why would he take this size with a bluff? I mean, this is just like he's just begging to get called by a hand like you have with a bluff.
You're right, but maybe that's okay. Like maybe like am I good? Right? Like I was kind of thinking about it from a more basic perspective. Like, am I good here? 1 in like 4.5 times.
Well, he's bet.
Spent 75 into 180.
Yeah.
It's like, am I going to be good here 22% of the time? Like,
well, what are the hands? Like, maybe, but what are the hands?
I mean, king. He can like maybe he's. The thing is, like, also, is he betting like a king here? Like, I don't know if he's betting like a weak king, like King Jack. Like even King Jack, is he betting King Jack?
It's close. Yeah, is he betting King Jack? I mean, he's probably betting Ace King if you say he can have it.
Right, which I would. And there's only 9 combinations of Ace King left.
And I do think King, like maybe Queen 10 is possible or King 10, something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's just weak because like I also would have expected him maybe to take a larger sizing on the turn or even on the river with like even 2 pair.
Right. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. This is a weird bet. Maybe this bet is just telegraphing like he is weak and he doesn't know how to bluff and he's just like doing something weird. But what is he taking that's like thick value for this sizing, though?
Right. I mean that's the weirdest part, right? Like does he have like pocket 10s that he's just convinced himself are no like rarely good? Like
that's crazy to me that he would bet $40 with pocket 10s on the turn though.
Right.
So like it's
not bet the flop. Remember the flop checked through.
Yeah. Also that's also crazy.
So maybe a flop. Maybe he's got like a weak flush. I mean, maybe his thick value is like 7-8 of diamonds.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna give 7-8 of diamonds a rough time if you're jamming on him.
Well, I doubt it.
I mean, he'll probably call. I agree, but I do think that.
But it's so weird. Why is he betting so small? Right. If he makes a flush.
Sizing the 7-8 of diamonds. That's the thing. Like, I think if he bets large, you just fold your hand.
Yeah, probably. I think that's fair.
I mean, no, if he bets large, you actually can probably call with your specific holding because you are because he would bet flushes for that size. You're blocking the nut flush, so he can have, he can have more bluffs that he's taking for this large. Like, well, I don't know. What are the bluffs still?
But maybe this hand then to this sizing. But like, I can't imagine folding to this sizing with this hand is the thing. Like, and I feel like we just have a lot. Like maybe we have other raises. Like Ace 10 off, right, with the Ace of Diamonds is a much better bluff rate. It's a much better jam.
are you calling it on the turn though?
That's a good question. Maybe. Sometimes, right?
Are you opening? Do you open all combos of ace ten off under the gun? You might.
No, probably not. But definitely sometimes, especially if I'm like talking to the guy next to me.
Yeah.
You know. If I'm sipping a beer and talking to the guy next to me, sure, I'm opening all combos of ace ten.
That's fair. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. Like, I think maybe it's too fancy to jam here, but on the other hand, I feel like if we call, we are very rarely good. We don't need to be good that often. I think 9-8 suited would be like the obvious bluff, like 9-8 of not diamonds.
Yeah,
I guess,
or just a jack. Like, I don't know. I guess he shouldn't have random jacks.
Yeah, like what jack does he bet the turn with?
Right.
Like literally what jack?
Maybe jack 10 that he's just turned into a bluff from the turn, which I don't think is entirely unreasonable.
Yeah.
Because, like, you could think 5 ways my jack 10 is just never good on a triple Broadway board.
Yeah.
Quite reasonably, I think.
Yeah. But he probably only has... There's only 3 combos of that, probably. He probably only has jack 10 suited. So.
He did flat from UTG +1, so yes, one would think he's got a relatively strong range.
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty interesting, but I'm not really sure. I guess we can do a reveal, so what happened?
Well, I flick in the call, and he says you're good.
Okay, well, never mind. I'm an idiot.
No, I mean, I don't know. It's just like It's interesting. I didn't even consider jamming. I mean, I really did not cross my mind. I should, like, just stick 200 big blinds down his throat.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's like a live tell as like people take a really small size with their garbage bluff because they don't know what to do.
Right. So maybe that's why I just showed my hand when he said you're good because it was a very friendly table. We were having a good time. I wasn't gonna make anyone show.
Right.
So I never found out what he had.
Yeah. I don't know. I could be an idiot here. And like maybe it's just a spew to jam. But
I think this is a great hand to run through a solver too. Obviously very multi-way, but at least a similar hand, where we've got can run the same board and just kind of say, if we raise UTG get called next up. Flop goes check,
but you could probably sim it. I think that would be worthwhile.
Yeah, because it should still say, like, the theory should still be the same, like, on the river, probably, or similar, when it's heads up and we now have the flush completing card and he bets small. Maybe it does just favor...
I bet you his small bet literally isn't a thing, though.
Yeah, it might just say game tree failed.
Yeah, like, it's just not a thing. But, yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Are you jamming ace king with the ace of diamonds, do you think? Because if it seems like your thought is that if the worst hand he's betting for value in ace king, then we're calling for a chop at best with ace king.
No, I think he can bet. We said king jack.
Maybe.
Well, it's interesting. Like, one thing I didn't consider when I was talking about this was like maybe he doesn't want to take a big sizing with it, like because the flush is out there. Maybe he just thinks, like, maybe in theory he's not supposed to use a big sizing because you can have flushes. So maybe, but like even so, I'm sure he's supposed to bet like 75% pot or something.
Right. Like even if it's not big, I think probably a bet of at least like $100 would be in favor here.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I would have probably. I don't know what I would have done in your spot if I would have just called or if I would have jammed. I guess the outcome would have been the same.
Because, like, would you fold? Like, would you fold ace queen here to this tiny bet?
No, I wouldn't.
Right? It just feels terrible. Like, it's not like, and I know we've talked about on past podcasts, like, if a guy check call, donks you small, like, just fold, right? Like, you're not good. But this is not a scenario like that where our opponent is literally never bluffing or anything like that.
Yeah, it just sucks. Like, I hate the spot. Like, I hate the spot on every street, but ultimately it worked out. So,
well, we bumbled our way into the win, and that is the MO here at Bankroll Burners. And if you liked what you heard, please like, comment, subscribe, leave us a note on what you would have done with second pair and the nut flush blocker.
Tell me I'm a donk. That's what I want to hear. Just like, wow, this guy's such a spewer. No wonder he's back to playing 2-2.
Yeah, this guy wants to give 7-8 of diamonds $1,000.
Exactly. No, I swear he never has 7-8 of diamonds there. But anyway, thank you, and this is your last chance to leave us that comment before we are gone for like a month. So
yeah, we'll be on hiatus as Mike celebrates his anniversary.
Yes, it's my 3rd wedding anniversary, and to celebrate, we're going on our delayed honeymoon. So there you go.
COVID. What a time.
Cool. Yep. So, all right. Well, we
Thanks,
love you
everyone.
all. Have a good night.